Warning: this short story may contain mature themes such as language violence and some nudity. Story prompt: Haunted. Title: Ghost of Guidance. But Bryden, please. The man closed the gap between them. You know, it was rather simple to lure you into this. What did you think? I was your soulmate or something? That shit doesn't exist. Madeline coughed again, blood spurting from her mouth, and the man smiled. You're 19 years old and have never had a boyfriend? No wonder it was so easy, almost too easy. Usually I'd go for older women, but I think if younger ones are easier to get, then I'll switch our targets to girls our age. Bryden chuckled as he pulled the knife that was in Madeline's gut sideways. Now, die beautifully. Those were the last words she heard before everything grew black and she passed away. What had she ever done so wrong in her life? Her main goal had always been to bring those around her happiness, to connect them with their destined soulmate. Yes, she could see what most would call the red string of fate. Every person she had met had a fated string, but she never had one. It had taken her years to find out there were actually others like her. Not many, but there were others. She thought perhaps one of the fateless people would be her destined one, that a string would appear. But it seemed as if she had found a crazy guy to try it with. Someone who was known as the Stomach Dicer. A name given to a serial killer who had diced up his victims' stomachs and watched them die and their guts leave their body with the final cut. The only reason the killer had gotten this name was due to some of the victims being found. When the body couldn't be found, a chair would be found and a chunk of the stomach would be on top of it. A few hours passed by as Bryden cleaned up the mess, tossing her body in the trash incinerator and getting rid of the evidence. He held a lunchbox, and Madeline could only assume it held some part of her stomach in it. Madeline had found herself watching him, anger and fear filling her as she looked down at her transparent body hovering in the air. This is sickening, she muttered, and Bryden turned. Who's there? She covered her mouth. Had he just heard her? You better come out now. He looked around, but there was nothing. He found no one. Shit. Did someone see? Surely not. I must be tired. I did make this one last longer. He turned, leaving the basement of the school that Madeline was sure everyone forgot existed. This was how this kid had gotten away with things. He burned the body in the old abandoned trash incinerators at the school. There was no way the police would think to look at a high school, but what Madeline worried about most was the fact her younger sister went to this school, and the killer had mentioned he was going to switch targets. She was going to have to find a way to make sure her sister stayed safe and the killer was caught. Madeline headed for the school door. Her plan was to go home and warn her sister. If Bryden had heard her, then surely her sister would. But as soon as she hit the door, it was as if she were repelled, bouncing off the doors like a ball. What the hell? She tried it once again, bouncing off the doors, walls, and the roof. Oh, so I'm bound to this place? Perfect. She paced the walls of the school building until morning came, and people began to enter. She watched the students come and go, her eyes narrowing as Bryden came. I'll get you for this, she hissed, but it seemed as if her voice couldn't be heard anymore. No! Panic filled her as she began to pace back and forth, and then she noticed a guy seeming to stare at her. She hadn't seen him before. Longish black hair, deep green eyes. She moved to him. Can you see me? He nodded, and joy filled her. And you can hear me. This is perfect! He held up a hand before heading off towards the stairs leading to the roof. She followed, not bothering to question who he was or why he was there. Once they were on the roof, the guy turned to her. Why are you bound here? Madeline sighed. Because I was murdered. The man nodded. You seem like a strong ghost. Do you hold a large amount of vengeance? Madeline shook her head. No, but I worry about the students here, and my sister. The killer is in the school. He killed me last night. The man's eyes grew wide. You were murdered here last night? Well, that would explain why your energy is so strong. I can set you free. No! He frowned. That's what most want, though. She shook her head. I need to keep my sister safe. He may target her once she reports I'm missing. By the way, my name is Madeline Harrant. My sister is Lucille Harrant. I wouldn't be able to rest until the killer was taken out." The guy sighed. "Well, since you introduced yourself and think we need to work together, I'll do the same. My name is Taylor Stone. I come from a bloodline of ghost hunters, if you will. We feel your energies and then come to set you free from the binds of this world." Madeline sighed. "You said my energy was strong?" He nodded. "One of the strongest ones I've ever felt, but there doesn't seem to be evil in it." She sighed. "Perhaps it has something to do with my own supernatural ability." This seemed to catch his attention, and she smiled. "I am able to see people's fated strings. I've done so my entire life, connecting people with those they're destined to be with." Taylor stared at her for a moment. "That is certainly interesting. What about your own destined partner? Now that you're gone, will they find a new one?" She shook her head. "I don't have one." He reached out to pat her shoulder, and she flinched, expecting his hand to go through her body, but it didn't. Taylor seemed just as shocked as her. "I've never been able to touch a ghost before. I usually don't try to, you're the most human one I've ever talked to, and did so out of habit." She felt a strange spark go through her body, and noticed something. A red thread was slowly forming from her to Taylor. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered as she stared at it in disbelief. "What?" She bit her lip. I didn't expect you to be able to touch me, that's all." How could she tell him that his fated partner was a ghost? Even if they could touch, it wasn't like they could be a normal couple. They couldn't go on dates or have a future. Tears pricked her eyes, and it angered her more. How come she was so human, even as a ghost? There was a ding for the bell, and Taylor glanced at the door. "Can you point out who killed you?" Madeline nodded, glad he was getting back to the point. "Of course, I can show you everything." He nodded, glancing around. "What I can't understand is why there aren't more ghosts around." She shrugged. "No idea. I thought I would fade away, but he kept my stomach in a lunchbox. Figured that's why I was still around even though my body was burned." Taylor nodded. "Could be. Perhaps the others already have their remains burned fully. If that's the case, we need to stop him before he places your part out in the open." It was true. If the cops found out and used it to identify her, and then told her sister and mother, they'd burn it, and she would probably vanish. "Great. So we're working on limited time," she muttered as he headed for the door. "Can others hear you? I know some strong ghosts can make others hear them." She shrugged. "I don't know. I thought Bryden had heard me last night, but this morning no one could hear me." He shrugged. "Just to be safe, whisper." She nodded, floating next to him. "Thank you." He glanced at her. "As long as we catch him, I should thank you. This guy has been causing an uproar in the spirit realm. With all of the ghosts coming and going, vanishing, the energy levels have spiked. Plus, going to school with a serial killer doesn't sound fun." He fell silent as they left the roof, heading to a classroom and then introducing himself as a transfer student. Some of the girls giggled at him, but he ignored them. His eyes were focused on her, and she felt her ghostly form blush as she stared at the red string that was connecting the two of them. She wanted to tell him, but that would do him no good. He would just have to try and find a form of love with someone else down the road. The thought was painful. Why was fate so cruel to her? Once he was sat down, Madeline settled next to him. "Boy with the short spiked blonde hair and blue eyes," she whispered to him. Taylor followed her line of vision. The guy looked normal, and that only creeped Taylor out further. "He is the one?" he whispered, glancing at her with doubt. "Do you think I would mistake my killer? Another blush covered her face. "I was trying to date him. He doesn't have a string, so I thought maybe—" Taylor stared at her. "You really have no luck." She reached out, touching the string that she saw between them, though he wouldn't notice it. "Tell me about it." The pain in her voice made him glance at her once more, and he wondered what she was doing. Class came to an end soon enough, and the two of them headed outside. He will make his move soon. He usually makes a scene once every 2 weeks, Madeline said as she watched Bryden leave the school grounds. Now is our chance to get to the basement. Taylor nodded, collecting his things and pulling out a video cam and a pair of gloves that he slid on. Just in case we find anything of use. I also don't want to mess with any DNA left behind. Madeline didn't second-guess him. He throws the body in the trash incinerator, along with the garments that got blood on them. Madeline's words made his stomach sink. This kid has everything planned out, doesn't he? She nodded, hovering next to him as she led him to the basement. The sign on the door said, "Keep out, danger." This is the old basement of the school that they shut down years ago. One of the janitors died down here because he fell into one of the trash incinerators, thanks to Heavy Bag getting hooked on him. Taylor flinched. I can't imagine that ended quickly. Despite how high the temperatures get, he was still very much alive as he burned. Madeline nodded. Some even thought he was murdered. Some still do, but no one will ever know for sure. Taylor turned on the camera. I'm about to head down into Redine High School's old trash basements. I got a tip that I could find clues about the stomach dicer killer. I'm recording this in case anything happens. If I am killed, this will be linked to another computer, so the footage will be safe even if I die. Let's see if we can't catch a bad guy. They went down the basement, the steps seeming to make eerie sounds. You are sure it happened down here? Madeline nodded. Yes. Taylor covered his nose, the stench hitting his nose. How has no one smelled this? Madeline was confused for a moment. Is it bad? He nodded. You can smell how many people have been burned. It's stuck in the air. She tried remembering the scent of the room, but could only remember the pain of having her guts slowly cut out of her. He moved over to a metal chair in the middle of the room. It was bolted to the floor, and there were cuffs on the arms and legs. This is where you died? The chair was clean, the metal smelling heavily of bleach and other cleaners. Madeline nodded, feeling somewhat sick. Yes. He filmed the chair before moving to one of the incinerators. He opened it, glancing inside. There were a lot of ashes, but it also seemed that there were things that hadn't been burned completely, possibly due to the amount of ashes in the furnace. We need to call the police as soon as possible. This is more than enough. I'm sure he hasn't cleaned his prints off of everything. And what if I haven't? A chill raced through Taylor and Madeline as they turned to see Bryden with a knife. I don't know how you found this place or came to the conclusions you have, but it's not like the world will find out. You should have had someone keep a watch when you want to intrude. Taylor glared at him, the camera aimed at Bryden. Even if you kill me, the world will still find out. Bryden chuckled. Will they? It's just you and me, and while I usually only kill girls, you'll be a fun little switch-up. Taylor backed away as Bryden approached him. That's cute, but you're only moving further from the door. Taylor bit his lip, looking for something he could use to fight off the man, but he couldn't find anything. Just accept your death. Bryden charged at Taylor, and Madeline screamed, throwing herself between the two guys, knowing she probably couldn't do anything. She felt something hit her, and light exploded, throwing Bryden back and seeming to render him unconscious. Madeline blinked, staring at the knife that hit the floor at their feet. What caught her attention was the red thread. It was cut. She felt movement behind her and noticed Taylor holding her. That thread. She blinked a few times. You can see it? He nodded, watching as it slowly seemed to turn black and burn away. Does that mean... She felt her energy fading slowly, and she collapsed against Taylor. I have the worst luck, remember? Tears slid down her face as she stared at him. But how? I think it has something to do with my ability. Her body was slowly beginning to fade. Wait, Madeline, you can't leave just like that. What about your sister and... She smiled softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. I know you'll take care of the rest, but I just feel tired now. Can you keep an eye out on my sister? Taylor grabbed her hand, pressing it to his lips. Yes. A few tears slid down his face as more of Madeline's body vanished. I'm glad I wasn't destined to be alone. Her last words seemed to hover in the air as her smiling, tear-streaked face vanished, the video camera having caught it all. A few days later. Today we have gathered in memory of Madeline Harrant, a wonderful young lady who had her light stolen from her far too soon. Her soul and many others will be able to rest in peace thanks to this young boy who had the courage to find the truth. All eyes turned to Taylor as he stood numbly next to the urn holding the only true remains of Madeline. The others cried, her younger sister didn't. She simply stared at the urn. Thank you, she muttered. He nodded. Did you know she always feared she'd never find someone? She even informed me of my soulmate showing me once. The girl's shoulders trembled. I don't know how you caught it all on video, but even if it is harsh to watch, can you make a copy of it for me? I want to remember that smile she wore, even if it was her true last moments. Taylor nodded. Yes, thank you for believing in me. Tears pricked the girl's eyes. How could I not? When my sister was so happy to find you. The end! Did you enjoy it? It was kind of different, was it not? I enjoyed creating this one. I know most probably would have gone for a more evil, haunting type story, but I kind of liked the idea of a bittersweet love murder story. Did I rip your guys' hearts out? Were you hoping that some miracle would happen and they ended up together? I had thought about making an ending like that, but then again I was like, none of this happy ending stuff. But I do hope you guys enjoyed this one, and if you haven't, like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye!